Welcome to our Meet the Experts TV production design panel. We're joined by Gary Mackay from Cowboy Bebop, Nelson Coates from The Morning Show, Rich Murray from Only Murders in the Building, Ondrej Nekvasil from The Wheel of Time, and Laura Fox from The White Lotus. Thank you all for being here. This might be maybe a very long answer from you guys, but what is a typical day like for you as a production designer? Nelson, you're laughing.
There are no typical days when designing. Every day, I think it's why we all love this career. Every day is unexpected, no matter how it's planned, and that's exciting. I think we all live off that adrenaline.
Mm-hmm. Ondrej, what about you?
No, I just I have the same feeling. Like I just every time when I'm going to the work or to the office, I'm feeling that I would like to go to the office. So I don't have a feeling that okay, I would like to stay home. That's kind of my feeling. And usually I'm starting with the construction guys because they are quite early. So that I'm starting like walking through the stages first, then I'm going to the workshop, and I'm going back to the office, talking with my crew, and that's how the day started, and now there's a lot of meetings. And at the end of the day, like now I'm able to start like designing something because finally I'm, kind of free, and nobody's having any like meetings or emails. Everybody is gone. So there's a quiet office now and I can start working. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gary, what about you?
Yeah, very much the same. And that's what is such a joy about the work we do, I think, is I love dealing with construction. I love the scenic department. I love the prop making and the set dressing department. Each of those is, it's so much fun working with each one of those teams and, encouraging them to bring their creative brains into the process as well. And sort of this melding of minds and problem solving. It's a really special and really lovely role to play. So, similar. We'll end up going around a bunch of construction sites, different sets, through the stages, through the back lot, over to the scenic workshop. How's this looking? Is this what you are after? Set deck department is above the scenic department for me, and so I'll go through all of their work. Prop department is next door. I have a little team that are making zipcraft, making little everyday spaceships off in the corner, and then back to the office and over to the office for the meetings, through the design room. So it's a joy. Mm-hmm. Long days, but they're fantastic days.
Laura, what about you?
Normally, I would agree with what everybody just said. This job would begin with a swim in the ocean with the turtles, my art director. I would also usually run into the director, and then all of those things.
You're just making everyone jealous right now. So.
How often does that happen that I can say that? Never.
I think one of the things that was totally different about this particular season and working in the pandemic, for those of us, especially in the United States, we were having to try to do creative things that need tactile and color exactness over computers, which is radically different. And so in presenting things to, let's say, Reese and Jennifer, not only would I have meetings on Zoom doing presentations, but then having to do duplicate work because you're having to present boards that are shipped to their houses with the fabrics and the colors and things so that they have something to talk to you about. So it added multiple levels, not just the protection for COVID, but actually double the work in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Rich, what about you?
Yeah, my days are, as a decorator, my days are pretty much like that as well. I start in the shops generally. I'm pulling dressing and pulling fabrics and pulling things together. And then as the designers know, it's always a bunch of meetings and scouts and everything, and a million people asking questions. So you can barely get anything done until it's way past everyone else's bedtime. Mm-hmm. But that's when all the fun starts. Yeah.
Well, Nelson, you just referenced like all the COVID constraints, but even like pre-COVID or, without COVID, like you guys can also be constrained by like budget or time or, just like new scripts. So, and I feel like that also forces you to be more creative, like Laura, you were talking about before. So what's the tightest constraint you've worked under and how did you adapt to it? Laura?
Ooh, That's an interesting question. I just think every job is different, to be honest. Here, I was constrained by what the hotel offered, as opposed to, here's a big empty stage, fill it with a design you've come up with. So for this job, I think the biggest constraint was just trying to tell the story, not overdo it, and work within what existed in a place like the Four Seasons and what you could do.
Gary?
For me on Bebop, I think it was, it went from the thought that it would be a 70% location-based show, and it became like a 80% set design, set built backlot show. Yeah. That happened very quickly. We'd started shooting before COVID even existed, and it had already happened. There was just the ability to take such a big circus, such a big crew into the city and take over the city in the way you need to. In New Zealand and Auckland at the moment, the city's having a whole bunch of new infrastructure built. So every time you dream up a location to go look at, it would there'd be a huge demolition site across the road. So we did spend a lot of time figuring out, and in the end, we built a backlot, and that was a saving grace, and it was fantastic. And I mean, we had all the time we needed, and we had all the chance to do what we want when we wanted, to do the stunts we wanted, whether it was day or night. At Bebop's full of a lot of gunfire and a lot of stunt work and a lot of car stunts, and so it actually worked in our favor in the end. But it was certainly not the show that was pitched when we started.
Ondrej, what about you?
I think that that what we hear is like, I can sign everything what I just hear, is that I think the most important for me is to find the right balance between you have all this information, you have the schedule, you have the budget, you have where you are, what's your locations, possible locations, what you can do, how big is the crew, and you have to do that kind of right kind of estimate what you can afford to build, what you can afford to dress, what you can afford to, if you are able to push the production to travel, in distance locations, to stay overnight somewhere, and all of that kind of together. Because the thing which I'm always aware that I don't want to have like a show where one set is great and perfect, and I don't have enough money or enough time to build another set. So I would like to always try to keep all the sets equally, knowing that some of them will be more important, but just keep the money and the time for every single piece of the show or a piece of the film, that actually everything is treated in the same kind of level. So that's kind of to find that balance, dividing the time, dividing the money, where we will spend the money for the construction, where it's more like a set deck, where it's more props, and that kind of balance is the trickiest always.
Rich, what about you?
The difficulties we had were mostly COVID related this time around on this show, because we almost always ended up having to change schedule. And that can be, as everyone here knows, is kind of a nightmare when you're switching up what sets you're shooting. For our show, it was all built. For the most part, we only had like 1 or 2 locations per episode, so we weren't out very much at all. And we didn't have the flexibility on our swings, on the stages where we built all of our swing sets. Again, you had to be in zone A in terms of COVID. And so we had to have all of our set dressers and all of the scenics and all of the carpenters testing 3 times a week to enough of them to be able to build on set if they were also going to shoot on that same set that same day. So we ended up breaking our teams into 2 and splitting the shifts. So it was like a 4 a.m. shift where people would come in early, paint and build and dress. And then probably come in like 5 or 6 p.m. after they had mostly been done shooting for the day. It was really tough negotiating, who was going to be able to get what done. And that happened every block for us, because in every episode we had a different hero character, a different guest star. So we had to build that entire, living room or the entire major set that person was in. And that became really tough if you're shooting on that stage, for 10 hours a day anyway. But so we split the shifts and wiggled it around, but it mostly fell to the scenics and the dressers at that point, because the architecture was up. You know, the windows are the windows in the building, you know, and sometimes we just changed out some of the hardware. But it was a lot of work from our part, but we pulled it off. We split the shift and everyone does it. You know, it's great.
Yeah. Nelson?
I think one thing that's really changed for episodic in the era of streaming is the fact that for network, we used to do an hour-long show. It was really only about 42 minutes. And now it's a full 60 minutes of work with the same amount of prep and the same amount of shoot time. So that in itself is a lot. So you're really doing the equivalent of 5 features when you're doing a limited series of 10 shows. It's an enormous amount of work to pull off fast. Most of us here do features as well. And the challenge of not having scripts and, you know, working at this speed, creating this volume of content is quite interesting. But in addition to the COVID protocols, one of the challenges of going and doing blocks and blocks of street dressing during COVID was all these companies were closed and you couldn't find the reps for those locations, or they wouldn't be in that day. And so the added complexity of just getting the most mundane approval was really challenging. And then getting people in and just being able to dress blocks and blocks of things. Or as Rich was saying, being in the same space and making sure that your airflow was great with the rigging crews and the dressing crews and the construction crews.
Yeah, it's like you need to dress someone's storefront and you can't reach them.
Yeah, we're also about to all hit the situation where we're going to suffer from lack of materials and, you know, just materials moving around the world. This is something that productions are going to have to take into consideration is, you know, ordering the timber that you would think would turn up next week is not going to be available for 3 months. So we've run out of far ahead.
We've run out of 2x4s and 2x6s here in Rhode Island. We're shooting Hocus Pocus too, and it's wacky. You would think, oh, it's just 2x4s, it's just 2x6s, and they're not available.
Yeah. Supply chains are in a mess, so it's got to be considered really.
I think I just paid 3 times what I normally paid for like a wall-to-wall carpet for a room.
And the construction teams I've been working with here in London, they say in the last 18 months, their supplies have gone up 300%. So, you know, most of their materials. So it's very interesting time, you know, and
high demand and low supply.
Yeah.
Well, not particularly for like your shows right now, but like, have you ever had a design you really had to fight for to be included in any of your projects in your career? Nelson, you're nodding. So
well, we had one of the things I really wanted to do was give Juliana Margulies's character in the morning show an equal weight kind of space to Alex's penthouse, Jennifer Aniston's penthouse. And without doing yet more modern spaces, I wanted to have like an Upper East Side apartment and a mid-block beautiful townhouse, and just trying to get that accomplished. Most friends I know who have that kind of situation have moved their living quarters or their master to the first floor so they can bust out the back of the building and have access to the gardens. And I really had to fight for the gardens because everyone said, that's not in the script. We're just in the bedroom and the sitting area. And I said, but what makes her at the same visual level and at this same wealth porn kind of, you know, look is being able to look out at this expanse and then see the backs of the other buildings. And it also tells you you're on the Upper East Side. And that took quite a bit of doing to convince. And by the time it was underway, all of a sudden they started writing for that. And so you see the inside and outside, and it creates that opulence that you need. Otherwise, visually, it would have been way out of balance.
Yeah, and it tells you so much about her as well. Like she's this like legendary anchor at the show, you know. Yeah. So Laura, what about you?
You know, on my first movie, 500 Days of Summer, there was a scene where this architect character was mourning his girlfriend and he was supposed to paint her picture. And I thought he would never do that. And I pitched a chalkboard idea and the director said, no. I said, okay, I'll make it work. So I did both versions really well. And then 3 days later, he goes, let's do the chalkboard version. So since then, I don't like to be a salesperson ever. So I always just, if I disagree strongly story-wise, I just try and figure out the best way to present that and let them choose. And usually it's never a fight. And if it's a lateral side move, I'm open because I think there's a lot of good ideas. So I try not to ever have to sell someone something they don't believe in, but I try and present what I believe to be the best idea.
I love the chocolate in that movie, and then there's part of a great montage at the end. So
well, that's like Nelson was just saying, and then it grew into like more. So that's how it goes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Ondrej, what about you?
It's on every project you have something that you want to make, and somehow it doesn't fit, or it's a cut from the script or something. On the first season, we had like one moment when we had like a kind of scene in the middle of the forest, and I pitched the idea like that they are like staying overnight in the middle of the forest. They're like a big oak, like a very let's say a few hundred years old oak, which is massive, that you can go into the trunk, which is like it's not like the whole tree, only like a first let's say 40 feet of that tree. And you can go in and you can sleep inside the trunk, so it's kind of like a complicated build to build something like that. And I think that we had a kind of very nice design. It does work very nice for the scene and for the story. And unfortunately, producers cut it as it's too expensive for the just few days in a forest. And I think that was really like a good touch, like that you have something amazing. It was really inspired by the existing trees, only that because of the shoot we have to build it. But it was like one of the sets that I was like a kind of sorry that we didn't make it, because I think it has a kind of good vibe, that for the whole show and for that whole scene, so we ended up in some cave, instead of it. But yeah, it's sometimes happened that you have some plans and like the producers, if they are cutting the budget of scenes, so they say, okay, this is too much. You don't want to spend this money for that scene,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gary, what about you?
I'm thinking back to a feature I did earlier in the year, where I had to build a visitor center in a redwood forest in California, where pretty much it's a thriller movie where the entire movie is set. Inside, outside, the car park outside the visitor center, in the snow. So we ended up building a studio set of all of that, and we built all the redwoods, the forest. We shot on location the set of redwoods we have in New Zealand in a place called Rotorua as well. But 4 of the 6.5 weeks were on the stage in our set forest, car park, and the visitor center itself, which had to burst into flames. And well, spoiler alert. But in that set, because we were spending so much time in it with this core cast, a real lovely ensemble cast, I wanted to make the set in the shape of almost like a trident. So it had the 3 branches and the 3 windows all looked out into what we'd built in the studio, into the trees, into the car park, and into the trees and rocks on the third side. And so that there's a whole bunch of scenes played around central areas of the set, that the walls behind and the roof, there's always lines and perspective moving away from you rather than a flat wall and a flat wall. And I really had to do a lot of convincing that yes, it's not typical, but here's examples of it. And I really believe in this, and I had to work really hard to have them in the end they went with my design, which I was really grateful for. And then to be halfway through shooting and for the director to sort of just tap you on the shoulder as you're standing beside the monitor and go, you know what, you were right. Thanks for that.
That was a win for you. Yeah.
That was a win. Yeah. And it's, and so you'd have to pick your battles. And you really have to pick your battles. How much does it matter? How important is it? And how hard are you going to fight for it? Yeah.
Rich, what about you?
I tend to have to pick the battle over elements that are, I think, pushing it a little too far. Laura mentioned earlier about on the nose a bit about set deck. And in so many times you never notice it unless the camera decides it wants to see it because you put it there. Especially about like for instance, in Teddy Demas's apartment, there is a Greek key in everything, on everything. It's in the fireplace, it's in the curtains, it's in the bar, it's in the woodwork, it's painted, it's just everywhere. You never see it on TV. You know, you watch the episode, you never see that. So I'm often fighting for that. And I think the one big one that I had to fight, at least on this last season, because neon's so cliche in Rockstar Apartment, you know, we had Sting's apartment, and I'm like, I gotta find the way of like selling the excitement of what we're doing with this. So we went through a lot of different designs of the neon, and it was a red neon, of course, in Sting. And then I pulled up the Roxanne album cover, or the single cover, and looked at the way the OX was a heart and an X. And I'm like, that's the way to sell the neon, is making an XOOX neon on his back wall in that same shape and the same flavor and the same hand as the album cover. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh yeah, well, of course we'll do that now. You know, it was a matter of figuring out which way to sell the secret, and make it sort of special for him and very focused. And I think if you tell the story of how it got there and what it is and why it's important, most, you know, and production designers are great about, you know, oh yeah, that's, of course, let's go there with that. But like producers and the directors and sometimes even the stars, you just have to sort of like wink and nod and tell them the story. And then that's, I sort of get that. Yeah. I sort of get a good response that way.
All the fans are gonna rewatch the season now to look for those keys.
All the fans have already written all of this. They have found everything. It's crazy amazing. And like, it only encourages us to go even crazier with it. It's so much fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you all for being here today. It was great speaking with all of you, and congratulations on all of your projects.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
It's been great being with you.
Yeah.
Thank you.